Hi everyone, I'm Carley of Gnarly Gaming, and today I'm a little more casual than I think I've ever been before. Usually you'll recognize that I typically sit over there at that table. That is probably the view you know from Instagram or YouTube if you watch my videos here. Usually I sit at my main dining table where we play games and I talk there. And today I was just feeling something a little more casual, a little something different. And so you're on my couch today, which is on the other side of all this, and you can kind of get a larger view of some of the games that live around me. But I wanted to have a kind of casual conversation in today's video. I felt my body getting a little serious and I didn't want it. So I'm just going to sit here and talk about the things I want to talk about today, namely how I figure out which games I don't like and want to get rid of, and then a game that I'm excited about right now I wanted to share with you all. But I have tea, and I'm gonna get my tea first. Oh, it's so nice. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is how I get rid of games that I don't like and figuring out which games to get rid of that I don't like. And maybe, no, I should say that I don't. I wanted to say, maybe I shouldn't say I don't like, but truthfully, I don't like. And I kind of have a couple of different ways in which I test my games to get rid of them. And maybe you're like, Carley, why would you get rid of games? You have a lot of games and you love games. But truthfully, I'm just not a collector of games. I don't run a big con like the Dice Tower, and I don't need to hold on to all the games I've played. I can lovingly gift them to local groups so that they can be enjoyed and or sell them so that new lovely games and experiences and people can come into my world. And so I think it's practical, because I'm not a collector and I'm more of a player, to talk about how you kind of curate games in your world. And I kind of have a couple of practical tests that I use to feel good in getting rid of games that I have. These are kind of guidelines that I've come across. One of them a friend gifted me that's really helped ground me in my decision-making process in terms of curating my games. So the first one of these kind of principles is actually a test that I'm stealing from my friend Fred. Now, for context of this test, Fred's two favorite games are Dominant Species and Gloomhaven. Those are the only ones that he's given a 10 out of 10 to on Board Game Geek, and he calls this the Dominant Species test. Now, if you've never played Dominant Species, Fred loves Dominant Species, I love Dominant Species, but it's this brilliant game that is one of the ugliest games that I've ever seen. The whole game is about playing as species and dominating one another. It's a very brutal game. If you don't like those, you won't like this game. That doesn't matter. What's important about this game is that it basically is just cones and cubes. It is super ugly. There is a little bit of art, but it's not good art. It's just cones and cubes going around the boards. You use cubes to represent your little species and then cones to mark dominance. If you've seen Cones of Dunshire from Parks and Rec, it's all about the cones. It was literally based off of this game. And the point of this game and the dominant species test is that a game that is good should still be good if it was boiled down to just cones and cubes. There's so many beautifully produced games out there, especially in the past year. Production has made some stunning leaps in terms of the games that we can get, and there is something special, and a game can be special without passing the dominant species test, that if it was boiled down to cones and cubes, it would still be a good game and you'd still like it. But I think it's sat in me as a pretty stronghold of the games that I want to get to the table and the games that I should be keeping in my collection, that I can love to look at a game and I can be enchanted by its themes and ambiance, but if it was boiled down to cones and cubes and I really don't like it, chances are after a while, when the sparkle fades and the next new pretty thing is out there, this game won't hit the table anymore. It'll be one of those that when someone's like, ooh, what's this? I'm like, oh, like it's beautiful, but like I don't really want to play tonight. And so that test has been really useful to me in determining whether or not I like something. Do you like the mechanics of a game? Do you like the core of the game? If the theme that you love so much was taken away, do you still enjoy gameplay? That isn't to say you can't enjoy theme. There are some games that I think are incredibly elevated by a theme, or that they capture a theme so well in the mechanics that it all folds together really nicely. I'm enamored by how games look often, and that does matter. But when you're trying to decide how you want to curate your collection and pick out those that you really, really love, I find this to be a really useful tool to help whittle out those games that are like, I love looking at this and I love the experience it puts me in, but I don't really like the experience of the game. And then maybe, just maybe, that is one that can leave. And so just what passes your dominant species test will be slightly different than what passes mine. It's really about those experiences that when you dig into them you really like. And a lot of that boils down to the mechanics you love and how they work together. There could be two games that kind of appear relatively similar, but one of them really fuels that experiential fire for you more than another. And maybe that's the one that should live on your shelf. And I guess that brings me to my next point. Sometimes when I'm comparing games, because people often ask me how I like games or if I'd recommend them, it's kind of tough because there can be games where I just simply like another game that's very similar more. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the game. It can just be that if I have to choose between X and Y, I always pick X. And in that case, maybe Y just doesn't need to live with me anymore. I find that with some of like the series of games that are very similar. So for instance, AEG has the line of like Calico, Cascadia, and Verdant that are all kind of very similar in like drafty little puzzly bits. And they're all different and they're all good. But none of them fully set me on fire, and I really just enjoy them all as like a very chill, relaxed experience. But I enjoy them all in relatively the same way, and I find myself leaning towards one more than others. I particularly think Cascadia is the best of the three, whereas I have a friend, Mike, who I know through Instagram, who thinks, I believe he thought Verdant was his favorite of the bunch. And we were talking about how I was getting rid of Verdant. I gave it to my friend Polina, and it's not a bad game. It's a good game. And a lot of the games I get rid of aren't bad games. They're good games. And so, but that's kind of how I figure out which ones to get rid of in my own collection. And it's tough. It isn't easy. And I think the first time I really did a full purge, I cried. And it wasn't about any game. It was just the fact that I had memories with all of those games. I've experienced them with people and things, and it's hard for me to let go of that. I have a hoarder heart, I think. And I mean, I still have plenty of games. But it was a good thing to let go of those. It was a good thing to let my shelves breathe and give space to other experiences that I really wanted and valued. And so if that's you, if you're trying to get rid of things, I really suggest like looking at kind of those two tests, the dominant species test and is there something I always would rather play. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of things, but it can start to give you a window into exploring them in new ways besides just, do I like this or not? And the last thing that actually really helped me is for a while there was a bunch of games that I was considering selling, and I moved them to my mother's house, and they lived there for about 8 months until she moved, and I really had to get rid of them. But during that time, I thought I'd missed them, and I didn't. And so I think just even moving part of your collection temporarily if you're feeling unsure about it, whether that's just the top of your closet, just take them, put them away, and set a reminder in 6 months to look at that box and think to yourself, did I really miss these? Did I ever have a time when I was like, oh, I wish I could take this so-and-so out of the box? I was about to say one that I got rid of that I didn't miss, but I don't want the point of this video to be negative or to bring down any games. I know I mentioned one, but my goal isn't to bash games and say that they're bad, and that's why I didn't do a video that was like my full purge and what I got rid of, because it wouldn't be charitable to games that I think are good games. They just might not be the things that set me on fire. They might have outlived their time in my collection, and there just might be other things that are very similar that I'd rather play. But you might be different in me. And so I hope this helps in terms of giving you verbiage for describing not only when you don't like a game, but also perhaps just to let yourself free of some of the excess games in your life. I kind of use this for both, the dominant species test to talk about why sometimes a game just doesn't light me up, despite being like thematically rich and all of those things. There's some games that have come out in the past couple years that people have like really loved, and I'm just like, if it was cones and cubes, you wouldn't care about it at all. And that's okay. It's also okay. It's also okay to keep things that don't pass the dominant species test, because if a theme, if a world again, just touches you in some meaningful way, then do it. Keep it. It matters to you. It's okay if you recognize that it isn't the cream of the crop mechanically. I think it's just also important to recognize that in yourself and to say, hey, like, this is why I enjoy this and this is why other people might enjoy it. And if you're trying to find folks to play with, then it helps you be able to articulate what a game experience really is to folks too. So that was all over the place in terms of what these things do for me. But I hope it gives insight into how I get rid of games, because I've gotten rid of like 200 games this year. And so talking about it, I think, is helpful without it being overtly negative in terms of I'm purging and here's what I'm purging and bringing a game down in that way. So that's that. So next up, I wanted to talk about a game that is bringing me a lot of joy lately. One that is new. It's from Jellybean Games. It's going to be on Kickstarter. That's not where the coaster is. It is over here. Cool. So I have it over here. And if you're like, Carly, that is not a new game. That is a box from Obsession. You are correct. However, in it is the new game. It's a little card game. So I just have it in here because it's a prototype. And it's called SlackJack, which is a riff off of blackjack in its name, but essentially it's this little social deduction card game that is fairly delightful. If you know me from anything, I feel like most people know me from NRB, you know me from social deduction, and I heavily enjoy it. And this one is a beautiful little party card game that is all about social deduction meets blackjack. And so in blackjack and in SlackJack, the golden number is 21 to hit. So just how does this game play? Well, 1 or 2 people, depending on player count, it goes up to 8 folks, but you can play with 4, will be the 10 of hearts, the captain, and they're going to pick 1 to 2 crew members to join them. They have a 10 and they want to get to 21, but they don't want to bust and go over 21. And if exactly 21, they get an extra coin, and if they are the closest, everyone on their team will get a coin as well. Now, I did say if they are the closest, and this is where the social bit of the social deduction comes into play. Each captain will pick 1 to 2 other people around the table to be on their crew. Crew mates, before they pick, can talk freely about what cards they have, what they can contribute, but either they want to be picked by the captain or they don't. They might want to be picked by the captain because they believe that their card will help the captain, and together they will get exactly to 21 or close to 21. I mean, a crew member really would prefer close to 21 because if it's exactly 21, the captain gets a little extra bonus for it. However, there are actual basic crew members that just have numbers on their cards, and then there are also advanced crew cards, such as this little queen right here. Everyone else's crew cards will also have a number associated with them, but a lot of them will also have an additional motive. And this could be for the captain's team, or it could be against it. The thing is, whoever the captain doesn't pick will be the scallywags, and they'll be against the captain, basically vying for themselves to try to get their total to better hit 21 without busting. If they do, they win and they get the coin instead. Sometimes they also have other hidden objectives, such as if your team loses, you get a coin. In that way, I might want the captain to pick me, knowing that we're going to lose and knowing that I will be the beneficiary of it. And then there's the name of the game, the SlackJack. This card wants desperately to be picked, and if they're picked, they basically hijacked the captain's ship. Nothing else will score, but they'll get 2 coins and 3 if they were picked alone. So if the crew was a very manageable thing for them to take down. There's also a set of treasure cards that the captain can utilize or other folks can utilize that allow them to draw up further. So if I have a card in my hand that lets me draw additional treasure, maybe I don't want to be picked by the captain because I know that I'll be able by myself to get closer to the total that I'm after. Or maybe I know that if I am picked, I can help us out a little bit by adding a treasure boost to our hand, getting us maybe closer to the total. And I can communicate that as much as I want, or I can lie about that as much as I want. We're all going to get a little extra information because you're going to pull cards and be able to discard other ones that you're not keeping. And so you'll have a little bit of information what's out there. The only one you cannot discard is the SlackJack. If that is your pick, then you have to discard something else, and that will be the fate that you are dealt. Like a lot of party card games, you're going to play a set number of rounds, and in this case, it'll just be until a player has 5 coins, which is pretty tight and short and sweet and wonderful. But I really enjoyed this. The blackjack aspect of it was very familiar. It would not take a lot to get a group, whether familiar with games or not, to get this to the table. What I think is really, really wonderful in this game is when you get up to the higher player counts, like 8 people around the table. It doesn't add more time, but everyone has more information. There's more people to contend with. If people are saying the same thing, you have to deal with like the likelihood of it. And what's really fun about it is you have multiple captains and they both pick people. And then that person gets to decide who they go with, and the other person just draws treasure to like compensate for basically not being picked. And that 2-captain dynamic is just phenomenally fun for a social deduction. I haven't seen it in quite the same way done before, and I think it just makes for a perfect social deduction party vibe. There's so many I'm hunting for someone and I have to be wary about other people party games. You think of like Mafia de Cuba and all of these other good ones. And this one is just, it's so familiar and so simple, but it's also just like brilliant in all the twists in ways. It's just like in One Night Werewolf, where there's all these different special abilities that can make people lie for different reasons. It's not overwhelming. It's super approachable, but it's just like such a good taste of social deduction and such chaotic fun. And I love it as a party game. It's become a new go-to to keep and take with me. I just went to Houston. It was one of those that ended up in my bag. I was very sad I didn't get to play it or much of anything else. But it's just like this perfect little punch of a party game, and I'm really excited to see Jellybean have it on Kickstarter. So go check that out if that is up your alley. But that's really the 2 things I wanted to share today. I wanted to share those tests and how I think about curating things, and this lovely new little game that I've just been immensely into lately. So that's it from me today, and I will see you guys for the next video.